Hello and welcome to the Brisbane Open House 2020 Design Talks program. This is our book talk for the series about a book called Brisbane Bricks. I'm here to introduce our chair, Tim Benetton. Tim Benetton is the director of Tim Benetton Architects based in West End, and he has over 20 years' experience as an architect. They work mainly on houses, new and as well as additions, and also love working on heritage projects. They value good design, simplicity and positive relationships, and their projects have a particular focus on the integration of gardening and landscapes. They love helping their clients realise their dreams of how they might live. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you very much, Anne. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen here in the studio and everyone at home. Welcome to our panel discussion on Brisbane Bricks, which is this lovely book here that we're here to discuss today. It's a photographic celebration of brick buildings in Brisbane. It's got over 170 photographs. It's got a short history of brick manufacture in Brisbane, and it's got some really interesting informative notes on selected buildings. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place, and acknowledge their elders, both past, present and emerging. So now to present to you the co-authors of Brisbane Bricks. First, we have in the red top, Virginia Russell. Virginia was born in New Zealand and studied at the University of Auckland. For many years, she practiced as an architect in Auckland, Sydney and Brisbane. She moved from Sydney up here in 2006 and she was impressed by Brisbane's vibrant brick heritage. So she began collecting photographs of interesting buildings, and these images became the genesis of the book, Brisbane Bricks. Since retiring as an architect, she's been a keen volunteer, including at Brisbane Open House, and she's published 2 books. And now to introduce you to Joanne Heath. Joanne was born in Port Macquarie, but she grew up in Brisbane mainly. She now resides and practices art up here. She had an extensive nursing career, and that preceded her art and photographic work. She's had two solo photographic exhibitions and a joint exhibition together with Virginia called Brisbane and Beyond, which was when Brisbane Bricks was launched in June 2019 at the Petrie Terrace Gallery. She's a member of the Royal Queensland Art Society and she exhibits regularly. So it was a real pleasure to receive a copy of this book when Virginia dropped it into my office probably about a month ago. So congratulations to both of you first on producing it.
Thank you.
To briefly outline to our audience how we thought the discussion might unfold this morning. We've got a number of slides. We may not get through them all, but we're going to base our conversation around those. And the 3 of us did have coffee yesterday to discuss how we might approach this. And I am expecting a few fireworks. So there was a few points of professional, there was a few points of banter. It won't be quite Trump versus Biden, but we are expecting a few things. So just prepare yourselves. Of course, I'm joking. It was actually one of the lovely things was each of you talking about each other's work and saying, well, this photograph of Joanne's had to be included and this one of Virginia's. So you've obviously got a great working relationship which has come through. I thought perhaps before we get into the slides of the buildings proper, Virginia, you could give us a bit of an idea how you and Joanne met and how the book came about.
Yes, certainly. We met at the Queensland Art Gallery book club, because we're both good, keen readers, and we would usually have lunch afterwards, and so we were sitting there and somebody asked Joanne about how her brick book was going, and I said, well, I was thinking of doing a brick book as well. So
she stole your thunder even at that point, Joanne.
No, I think we needed each other because I don't think either of us would have done it without the other. Yeah. We combined well, didn't we? Joanne's the artist and I'm the nerd, so but we both love photography and books.
Yeah. And it was, Joanne, like a 2-year project? It took you quite a while to... to prepare
yes,
it?
Tim.
Yeah.
Approximately 2 years, although Virginia likes to go to 3.
Oh, well, it's a year since we launched it, really, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
it was really great to look through it. Well, I wonder whether should we start now? We might go to the slides.
Yes, certainly.
And we're going to start. I think Janella's going to bring up the first slide. We're going to start with a building which is close to my heart, as we had the we've had the privilege of working on this, doing some restoration, helping with some restoration work. So, Joanne, perhaps you could tell us about what we're seeing on the screen at the moment.
So this photograph I took with a Canon camera and with a 18 to 200 mil lens on the way to a concert. Yeah. So it is a concert hall now, the old museum. But I was thrilled when Virginia decided to have it for the cover of the book.
Oh, well, I just had one look, and so that's the cover.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I took the photograph and Virginia designed the cover.
Yeah. And it's a building that really has a big place in the hearts of a lot of Brisbaneites, particularly those of the generation which would have visited when it was a museum.
It certainly has, and it goes back to when there was a fire. This is back around in 1890. There was a fire, and they decided they had to have a competition for the new exhibition site. So the architect for it is George Henry Male Addison, and his pen name was Rough Sketch.
Okay, I didn't
So
realise that.
it was a rough sketch that won the competition.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like a rough sketch. If you see it, I think it's exhibited inside the building there.
Yeah. And Joanne, you've got a personal connection to this building. So Janella, we might go to the next slide.
Yes, I certainly do. And one of the things is my dad was a bricklayer, and we found this lovely photograph that was when he was working on the actual site, on some of the intricate detail of the building. So my dad was a farmer, and that was in New South Wales.
And he's the one sitting or the one standing?
He's the one sitting, doing all the... Oh, they're both working. And actually, I've got a couple of other photographs where there are more people, but they're not doing any work. Sorry about that. Anyway, so my dad was born in 1898, and he lived till 1978. Yeah. So a beautiful person, and I was really pleased when Virginia said, yes, we could dedicate the book to my dad.
Oh, yes, well, we had to. It's such a wonderful photograph, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's amazing is that, over, about 130 years or 120 years later, there's now another round of work happening to just make sure that those... it's a robust material, isn't it, brick? But
yes.
It's had a particular old mortar, that one, so you have to replace it over time, and that's one of the reasons that it actually preserves the bricks, I think.
That's right. Mortar. And Tim actually worked on the building as well.
We helped draw some things, but I guess one of the characters that we all know is Maury Potts-Reba and his crew, and particularly his sons who did a lot of that work. But there's a sort of we couldn't map the path, but there was some path through your father and now Maury, and it's great that these public buildings have this sort of continued love, isn't it?
Yes.
It only had 5 years as an exhibition building and 87 years as the Brisbane Queensland Museum.
Yeah.
But,
and when did it stop being a museum?
In the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yes, around about then. Yeah.
Yes.
So 35 years ago, roughly.
Yeah. So anyone born, say, up until about at least 1970
we still call it the old museum. But it's a Queensland Youth Orchestra now, isn't it?
And it did house... No, it's right,
yeah.
Queensland Youth Orchestra,
yes.
Yeah. And it did house the art gallery for a time too. Yes.
So I think we've got the next slide is
a bit of a detail.
Detail. So That's it?
Yes, so it's got those wonderful glazed bricks. This is at the back of the building. And,
this is the north side.
I'm not sure if I've enhanced the blueness, but you say they are quite blue. I can't remember now.
There's a bit of... I think they are salt glazed bricks, those ones, aren't they? The hard ones.
Yes, and so you get that lovely contrast with the light coloured brick and the orangey red brick, and then the glazed bricks underneath, which... I think you've put a balustrade in front of that brick balustrade, a glass one now.
Yeah, the recent work
but
we had to...
I took that quite early on, yes.
Yeah, it's to sort of bring these buildings up to current safety codes.
That's right. Well, it has to happen, doesn't it?
And some of those replacement bricks, I think, were handmade in England, sort of the off-season for some of the farmers who have particular clay pits.
Oh.
So there was some of those baluster bricks which were shipped over and replaced.
Oh, right, yeah. The glazed bricks were made locally by J. Campbell Brickworks.
I don't think we could... So they've held up a lot better, those ones, but they're very hard to find any replacement, which is good because it's very hard to find replacement ones, those. All right, well, let's perhaps move on to the next slide.
Oh, yes.
So, Virginia, what can you tell us about this one?
Well, that's where I live, and I'm up in the top floor, which was the showroom. But that building, you can't tell it from now when you look on the outside, but it was built in two sections, and the first part on the corner there was 1912, and then in 1938 they added another bay on to further on behind the trees there. And that's the bit I live in, but it's pretty seamless from the outside, you can't tell.
Yeah.
And they used exactly the same bricks. They redid the parapet so that it all was homogeneous.
And do you know where those bricks were sourced? Was that another one of the local...
Oh, there's a rumour that they
yards?
came as ballast out from England, but I haven't found any confirmation of that. Yeah.
It sounds like quite a lot of the old buildings were, you'd think, I suppose brick making in Brisbane started pretty early, but... It sounds like there's quite a few buildings
with the convicts,
which were sourced with English bricks,
yes.
or made with English bricks.
Yeah. Well, there was a thing with bricks in that carrying them overland was a lot more expensive than carrying them by ship or having a local brickworks. So transportation was a big factor. I think you had something in there about it was almost the same cost to drive. Was it from St Brigid's to take them sort of 5 kilometres overland was... almost the same cost as shipping them to Sydney or something like that, yes.
So they came as ballast in ships. Yes.
Well, yes, it's rumoured that the London ones did, but...
and when was the Woolstore built then?
Oh, well, 1912 was the first bit, and the architect was Robin Dodds, who's quite a well-known early architect here. Yeah. Actually New Zealand born. but
good to the Kiwis to reclaim everything that comes over here,
that's right.
Including you, but
he worked in Brisbane for 20 years and then moved to Sydney and died at an early age. But there's quite a few buildings in Brisbane that we can put down to Robin Dodds, and I've forgotten his name now, but there's a book that you can buy that's all about his architecture. He did the Mater Hospital, private hospital, St Brigid's, which we might talk about soon. Yeah.
And we had a brief discussion yesterday about perhaps, brick buildings have a different experience. So Joanne, I know, lives in a 140-year-old timber Queenslander, but you live in a brick building. Did you have any thoughts about how those experiences differ? Or?
Well, brick does absorb the heat, and I lived in a structural brick building, terrace house in Sydney before I moved up here, and now I'm in another. I mean, the walls are that thick, so it takes. They actually work quite well with the heat until the heat reaches the inside, and then it re-radiates onto the inside. So you're okay for a month or so of hot weather, but after that they do all heat up. But I think bricks are a thermal mass, so they can be used in passive solar architecture.
It's great to be able to get the right amount of heat on at the right time.
Yes, and using it in the right way and shading it when you want... don't want the heat to go into the bricks and cooling them and so on. Yeah. All
right. Well, we've got a whole lot of important churches in this, so let's move on to the first of those. Now, I think, Joanne, you were going to tell us a bit
Brigid's.
about this one.
Yes.
Was this a labour of love to get this in the...
This certainly was, and I'll give you a haiku to start off with. A red church on a red hill, rising up to heaven, 60 wooden steps. So yes, to get to it, I decided I had to experience the church, not just take a photograph of it. And so I walked up the 60 wooden steps from Musgrave Road, and then when I got to the top, I found, there was an easier way to get there from the car park. Anyway, so this church is also by the architect Robin Dodds, and I think just about everybody in Brisbane would know where this church is. Yeah. So St Brigid's, what else?
Did Archbishop Dewick have anything to do with this one?
Yes, he does have a lot to do
on
with
one of his favourite hilltops.
The Catholic Church, including Stuartholme, which we'll see the photograph of that soon. Mm. Yes, so he just did love brick buildings, and he loved high hills.
Right. And was his love of brick due to the material, or was there some other benefits that you could get by building out of brick?
I'm not sure. There is
a bit more cost-effective, perhaps.
Carnarvon is in Dornoch Terrace. It's not on this list. I'm sorry to deviate. But that was where the nuns lived, and it was wooden. Right. And he had it, he brought in the bricks, right. And now it's one of the most beautiful brick buildings.
Yeah, I think that's been restored over the last few years too.
Dornoch Terrace,
beautifully restored, yeah.
So a lovely brick home now with a beautiful garden. Yeah. So it's nice to see gardens. Now, do you want any more on St Brigid?
Oh, well, I was just going to say that Robin Dodds was inspired by a cathedral in the south of France, and it's pretty imposing, and the verticality of it mirrors that.
I've always loved the look of that, which was, the walls going up behind the line of those arches when you drive up that hill.
And the scale of it is quite massive, the entry porch. If you see a photograph with people beside it, it's quite massive. And in the top of the gable is a lovely statue of St Brigid, and we have a photograph of it in the book. Joanne took a lovely photo of that. Right, yeah. Mm.
We should say actually at this point that there's quite a few haiku or Japanese-inspired poems that you've written for this, which is kind of a nice touch to include with the photography.
I'll give you another one after.
Okay. Is there anything more you wanted to say on this one, Joanne, or should we...
I think we should probably move on.
Stuartholme. That's one of yours, Joanne.
Oh, Stuartholme. Yeah. Again, that's another beautiful girls' school, and that's at Toowong. And so you can see that from a lot of places in Brisbane. And when I discovered this wonderful building, one of the students, it's a girls' school, one of the students took me through where I had to meet the person, and I discovered this wonderful building. I mean, I never knew it was there before.
It sounds like a lot of the book has actually been a process of discovery. You know, you start looking for things.
We walked for miles. Neither of us has a car, so Joanne walked all around South Brisbane. I walked all around the valley, and
So it was a fitness regime as much as an artistic pursuit.
Yeah. It's much easier to walk and catch a bus or catch a ferry.
Yeah,
you probably do see the city differently.
You see more things.
When you walk,
there's a couple of photographs in the book that I took from back streets of the valley where you can see the back of buildings, brick buildings, and interesting views and things.
Yeah. And was Stuartholme the one? There was one of these books I remember you wrote. Sorry, one of these buildings where, again, Archbishop Dewick said each of the parishioners could perhaps buy a brick. Was that this one, or was that a different?
That was St Brigid's. Yes.
St Brigid's.
Oh, St Brigid's.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, I found myself thinking, you couldn't do that, could you? If you want to buy a block of sandstone, it would be out of reach of most people, but. When you contrast the sort of everyone can afford a brick.
It's a good marketing campaign,
isn't it? See what you can make with it.
Buy a brick, yeah. The architects for Stuartholme also designed St Ignatius in Toowong, I think that's how you say it, and also the Villa Maria in the valley.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they've got a similar style.
Do you remember who the architects were?
Hennessy and Hennessy.
Hennessy, right.
Yeah. There was similar patterned, multicoloured sort of brickwork, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, perhaps we'll move on to St Andrew's Uniting Church, I think we've got next, which is, I guess, another favourite building of mine whenever I go through the city.
Yes, well, this photograph is not actually the one in the book, but it illustrates what I love about that building is the curved apse and then the arch on top, and just the simplicity of the forms and the subtle difference of the different coloured brickwork, and also the very modest cross that's in the it's just lovely, I think. And underneath that curved apse, there's corbelling and it becomes much more decorated lower down at street level, but at the top it's got that lovely like medieval sort of
and you
massing.
can't see it, but it's quite a tricky transition to the street because the street's on the slope.
Yeah, actually they designed the front door to be on that corner there under the tower, but it didn't quite work out, so they used the door at the back now.
And was this one you said that when it was built, people were a bit disappointed, they thought they were expecting something more grand?
Well, not so much grand, but the previous church, the Presbyterian church, which the land was taken over by for the Central Railway Station, it was a Gothic church, and the parishioners expected another Gothic church, but this was another architectural competition, and it's not its Romanesque revival.
But you said it's, I mean, perhaps not that long after it was built, people really started to appreciate it then for what it was.
Well, I hope so. Yes.
And I think we might have a detail.
Yes, that's right. Around the side, there's this beautiful bay window, which is an illustration of how the architects contrasted the plain massing with a bit of fancy detailing in certain parts. And
is that on a sort of a? Is that a hidden view, or is that on a street?
It's on the Ann Street.
So
beautiful
facade. Yeah.
Okay, so on to another denomination or just a different church? I'm not sure.
Quickly on that one.
Yeah.
Virginia likes it, but there's a few other ones that I want to include.
Okay, so we've got the sign, we've got the red shirt for stop and the green shirt for go, and Joanne wants to go. I can see that. So.
Well, that church is actually diagonally opposite me, and it is a beautiful church, a beautiful design. And now I want to give you another haiku.
Okay.
And we'll go on to the Princess Alexandra Hospital.
Okay.
Photographing dusty, dirty demolition at the end of the day. A blue broken butterfly. And that is what I found when I got home, this butterfly with a broken wing. Yeah. So this building was actually opened to the public in 1956, and it was named the South Brisbane Hospital until Princess Alexandra came to visit, and then they changed it to Princess Alexandra Hospital. And so the new one had already been built on the hill, and here was me. I mean, I've got a nursing background, and they were trying to dampen, the demolishers were trying to dampen the dust with a little trickle of water. Yeah, and I thought, oh, no.
And Joanne, with this one, I guess it's an interesting photograph to include, but in that it's not a photograph of a lovely old building, but to me there's a lot of stories that we all associate with.
There are a lot of stories to that.
Joanne, that was a very comfortable building to work in.
To work in, it was ideal. I loved it. And the architecture, I thought, what was so beautiful about Princess Alexandra Hospital? And it was the light.
Right.
Because of the wings. Yeah. And yes.
Well, it's very important, isn't it, for all buildings to
the light.
With how you
the
deal with
natural light.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's Matt Smith. And there's another shot then.
Oh,
Yes.
That's my favourite one.
Yes.
So dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly with that big pile of sort of rubble at the bottom there, isn't it?
Yeah, and then there's the one bit on the left there with windows still in it.
Yeah.
Looking.
And I guess we were also saying that we live often in a lot of Queenslands, but this is a building which would have had births and illnesses and deaths, so
Yeah,
That's right.
the sort
Yes.
of public part of our lives is often in these beautiful brick buildings.
correct.
Yes. And the artist, Ian Fairweather,
Right.
he was a patient there while I was working there. Yeah.
Okay.
And I left Princess Alexandra Hospital to go overland through Asia and up to London. And that was where I got my love of photography. Right. I started photographing.
And did you go through Iran, did you say? Is that
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the bricks relate to the colour of the clay, and they were white, and some of the beautiful homes made out of the white brick. And that's where carpets, the Persian carpets, were made. And even in one that I visited, they had the poppy pods, and they were combing the poppy pods.
Right.
Oh, I'm getting off the track.
No, that's right. I just think there's a great tradition of bricks, and then it's come through the whole of that, the East, the Middle East to Australia. But so let's... Sorry,
I was
Virginia,
just going to say, I just thought this morning that bricks are a bit like bread, aren't they? They're just like a few simple ingredients and add heat, and then you've got this lovely, wonderful
probably
product.
both started about the same time too.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on then, because it's not... we got...
Oh, the Brickless Creek Hotel.
So we got a bit of fun with this one.
Yes.
So Virginia... You did explain to me, and I can see up there in the top left of that slide, there's 3 initials.
Yeah, WMG, that's William McNaughton Galloway. And I think it's a gloriously exuberant building is the way I describe it. I think it's described as French Renaissance style, but the William McNaughton Galloway was a bit of a colourful character as well. He built the Brickless Creek Hotel in the year that he was actually Mayor of Brisbane, but I'm not quite sure why, but he was only Mayor for a very short period of time, the 22nd Mayor of Brisbane. But anyway, he was a bit of a... he liked to tipple.
Right.
And
That's why you own a hotel, I suppose.
After a 3-week binge, apparently, this was in the newspapers, one of his barmen locked him in an upstairs room, and he tried to escape, and jumping from one balcony to another, and fell. And even though a passing doctor tried to help, and he got sent to hospital, he died 40 minutes later. Oh, wow. So people say that his ghost haunts the hotel.
Okay.
And if I could just quickly tell you about his wife Anne, because she took over the hotel, but she couldn't afford to keep it on, so she Perkins and Company took over the lease. I mean, she stayed leased. They bought the hotel and she maintained the lease on it. But then 6 years later, they refused to renew her lease, and she was so upset she nailed herself into the hotel until they had to forcibly remove her. So.
There'll be a few adventures that have happened in that building.
Yes, I think there's a few others as well. Yeah.
Everybody would have a tale.
Yeah. All right, so then we've actually got some... It's not all older buildings.
No.
So, Virginia, what can you tell us about this one, which is at 900 Ann Street?
Oh, my friend said to me, she goes to the church nearby. She said, you've got to come and look at this building. That's 900 Ann Street, and the land belonged to the Trinity Church in the Valley. And they have, I'm not sure what I think it's a leasing arrangement. And so this building is built on church land. But the bricks are just at the back of the multi-storey glass tower, and they're a sort of a tip to the brick church and the brick.
Okay. And so, what drew your eye? What drew your eye to to this one? I mean,
it's
obviously
very
contemporary.
quirky.
Yeah.
I like the contemporary use of the brick. Yeah. It's a nice human touch at the back. There's a sort of a walkway underneath the brick part with the coffee shop and so on.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I said, that's got to go in the book.
Yes, so
yes,
we each had a few of those photographs, didn't we?
Yes.
Of the other person.
Yeah, no, I think that was one of the lovely things that I noticed. And that's by John Wardle, who's a very good Melbourne architect. And I guess bricks had something of a renaissance over, well, probably the last 1 or 2 decades perhaps. But as you say, there's some really good contemporary uses.
Yes.
And it goes back to the Tower of Babel, I believe.
Okay, you'll have to explain that leap from John Wardle to the Tower of Babel, Joanne.
No, we don't have time for that.
All right. Let's move on then.
What else have we got? Oh, yes, that's lovely. Well, these new buildings, they display all of the elements of the older buildings, like the brick banding, the different coloured brick banding, and like 900 Ann Street, the previous slide, the patterning of the different coloured bricks. So the new buildings are using, but in a new way, yeah.
Joanne, did you have something you want to say about this one? Or?
Oh, I think this is one where Virginia and I had a little bit of competition, but I won that one. Yeah. She took it probably about the same time. Sometimes
so you mean the competition was you each took a photo and then you were trying to work
some
out
buildings we both had a link, a liking for, and we both took photographs, like the Valley Pool. Shall we go into that one?
The Valley Pool, yes. I wanted to have another swim in it. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Oh.
Now...
All right, let's move on to this lovely building in the valley then, so the Calile Hotel.
Yes.
Joanne, I think you had some words on this.
I think everybody knows the James Street area now, and that is where you find the beautiful white bricks that have been used in a very contemporary way. And the hotel, the Calile Hotel, it hasn't been finished very long. And does everybody know James Street?
Oh, they would, wouldn't they?
Sorry. Yes,
yeah, it's
beautiful.
a really lovely precinct, that one, isn't it? The
Yes,
Calile, do you know who the architects were for that one? Is that
it is in the book. I've forgotten their name now, but if you look in the book, it is in there. Yeah. It's the same architects who did a lot of the other rest of the street.
I think it might be Ingrid's and Spence, perhaps.
Oh, I think it is. Yes, I think it is.
So we did try to include late buildings now, as well as the old buildings.
Yeah, there's another one, the Spire.
The Spire is a beautiful one.
Yes.
I'm not sure we got a photo of that one.
No, we don't have a photo.
Only of the brick columns.
Yes,
and
it's in the book, but not on the slides.
Yeah, I saw the brick columns, and it's just the decorative component. The Spire does... Oh, do you know the Spire?
The audience will have to buy the book to be able to see this one, Joanne, won't they?
They will.
Yeah. Well... Yes. It's a beautiful building, and I just took the brick columns. There were brick columns, and there is a haiku that goes with that. And again, they might have to buy the book for that. Yes.
All right, well, let's move on to another reasonably recent building.
Yes.
This one...
It's an interesting use, another use of brick as a screen, and it's just lovely. Also,
mention Maurice.
Pardon?
I mentioned Maurice.
Did he work on that building?
Yeah, he worked on that screen.
So the architects were Donovan Hill.
The architects were Donovan Hill and Maurice Portscheber.
Yeah, so the
worked
same
on
guy
it, apparently,
who does
the bricklayer.
Restoration heritage work.
Yes,
may have done that.
Also, going back to James Street, on the side of the Calile is more brick screening, which is a really nice use of brick.
Yeah, it's particularly good use in the subtropics, isn't it?
That's right. So you get the breeze through.
It's solid, but it lets the breeze through, and
it's
secure and gives you some privacy.
Yeah. Right.
The East Brisbane State School. Now that's going back.
So this one, Joanne, we've got the Newmarket Brickworks chimney.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I thought we didn't have a lot on bricks and brick making, and I walked out to Newmarket to photograph that, and that is the only part of the Brickworks that is left now.
Yeah. And do you know how long that operated for then? So.
Oh, now you're asking too many questions.
Or which buildings those bricks might have gone into?
No. Oh, you haven't got it.
I haven't got it.
Sorry.
Started in
We'll
it's 1912 to whenever.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 1986 or 1990s or something like that.
Yeah.
But there were brick fields all over Brisbane.
Maybe just mention a few of those because they're all probably hidden.
Well, Roma Street was called the Brickfields,
Right.
so there was clay there and clay pits, and then also Frogs Hollow.
Yeah.
And,
so Frogs Hollow is it's almost where we are now, isn't it? The lower part of the city.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and also Clayfield. Well, Clayfield's named after the clay pits that were out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that particularly. It sort of reminds me almost of some of those buildings you see that are left as ruins throughout South Asia and Iran and places where it's just a single, quite beautiful structure, isn't it? Okay, so then we've got another little city building, the mansions.
Oh yes, well, we're lucky to have it because it was on the demolition list, but got taken off. And I think the Bellevue Hotel was on the other corner, from what I've read.
Yeah.
I wasn't here then, but that was demolished. But luckily we've still got the mansions. It was built by 3 parliamentarians, and it's how many? 6 attached houses. Right. And so that was where they were going to...
So was it to house parliamentarians? Or?
Well, I think they were country members, and they wanted a pied-à-terre in the city, you know, so they built the mansions. I think it's been redeveloped as part of the new development down there. Yeah.
All right. We might actually we should perhaps maybe we can get to slide 24, Janella, because I thought this was a really interesting building, St Clement's Church.
Yes.
In that, so this is in South Brisbane, and you had a great story about, I guess, a number of different denominations coming together to sort of bless this one, and it was the first church where
Lebanese. It was the first Lebanese church, and they raised the money to build it. And it is a beautiful, simple architecture, and yes. So, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that. I think, yes, one of the things that impressed me was that it didn't just cater for, it's a Melkite church, but it didn't just cater for that, it catered for all Eastern religions. Yeah, so they welcomed everybody,
Which is a great lesson for all of us, isn't it, really, now?
Yes. And one of my friends, he was a doctor at Princess Alexandra Hospital, and when he saw the book and he saw this photograph, he said, I have to have 4 copies because that is where he got married.
Yeah, nice.
Yes.
All right, well, let's go to our last building slide now. But before we talk about this, I thought it's probably a good idea to ask both of you, you've written this, you've produced this lovely book, but what is it that you think that people who get it or who might want to buy it, or how might they be inspired? What do you think might come about of what you've produced here?
Well, I think we hope that it would be inspirational, but as well as nostalgic. And we've touched on the nostalgia before about people being married or christened or in hospital and all these buildings there. People will have a personal relationship with these buildings. So it's nice to foster the retention of and adaptive reuse of a lot of these buildings, and we've got some in the book. There's Peter's ice cream factory in West End. Joanne photographed a church that's been turned into a house, and various things like that.
The church is still there, but now it's a very upmarket residence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Joanne, what do you think? How might your book inspire people? What do you think you'd like them to do?
Well, how will it inspire them? Perhaps perhaps to have a look at some of the brick buildings and perhaps to discover others, as we haven't photographed all the buildings that are brick in Brisbane.
Suggestion, isn't it? Because as we said, our timber culture is so strong. We've almost got to learn how to see these buildings again, and maybe that's a good segue to South Brisbane Station there, which again is it's really one of my favourites.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's beautifully restored. I'm actually not sure that it looked so beautiful when it was first built. I think just the combination of the bright red brick and the cream and the charcoal or chocolate colour, the dark colour, dark and light, and the red. It's just beautiful and beautifully proportioned, and that was restored by another one by Maurice Pocheba.
And I think one of the things that fascinates me is if you actually get up close and you look at it, there's a particular pointing technique.
Oh, the tuck pointing,
which is, you've almost got to know about it, and your book will perhaps help people become curious and discover these things, to understand just how special that technique is.
We could have written a book that was twice as thick. Yeah. We had to cut a lot out. I was going to put stuff in about the brick patterning and the pointing and all that sort of thing, but just didn't have room.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should tell you that there are history notes at the back. Not on all the buildings, but a lot of history notes which people can refer to, and there is an index. Yes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned maybe students of architecture might be interested in it, but also all the other people who, again, might want to go and start walking around the city and discovering things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think that pretty much gets us to the end of our time. Congratulations again to Virginia and Joanne for producing this. Thank you on behalf of the city for doing it. And thanks to our hosts at Superordinary and Brisbane Open House for arranging the event. You can get copies of the book. I'll just hold it up again. There it is. So you can get copies of the book at all good bookshops. A particular thanks to Avid Reader in West End for helping with all the media. And I think that's it for today. So thanks again.